the first time I came to a Fort Myers Beach Town Council meeting. And it really gave me a hard time because I had socks on.
Oh, you did?
They were just messing with me, but it was fun.
When was that?
Yeah, when was that?
1996,
So
Wow.
right after incorporation.
right after incorporation.
So a little bit of history. The town of Fort Myers Beach incorporates in 1996, end of 95, 96.
End of 95, beginning of 96.
They write a comprehensive plan, which are the rules. And then for some reason that I'm still trying to understand, there needs to be a land development code after that. They call you.
Well, they actually called me to help with the comprehensive plan first.
Okay.
So I worked on that in 1997 and 1998 as a consultant, because at that time the town had no staff planners. They had nobody on the staff to be able to do that or to have the time to do that. So I put together a team of other consultants, and we spent 2 years doing that. And once that was done, we began working on the land development code. So why was that needed? Well, state law requires you to have a land development code, and until you adopt your own, you're using the counties. So we didn't want to keep using the counties. If we wanted to keep using the counties, there had been no reason to incorporate.
Right.
Right.
So it was a matter of basically taking the county's code and adjusting it so that it fit the new comprehensive plan, and so that it eliminated things that were irrelevant to the beach and really calibrated the regulations to what people at Fort Myers Beach wanted to see.
So just
And
to,
what were some of the things that they wanted different than what was in at the county?
Well, for instance, the Diamond Head Hotel was pretty big, and when that was approved, sort of covering up a beach easement, that was the sort of like the last straw of the county approving too much in an area that was already overbuilt. So that was maybe the flashpoint, but the county's attitude was always more development is good. And when you're sitting in traffic 45 minutes each way, coming and going, maybe that's not true. So that was issue. There are also a lot of conservation issues and just local governments. Fort Myers Beach has always had such an activist community that really gets involved in public affairs, and they always had to go all the way downtown and speak at the county commission, and now they could come and speak here to their own people.
so if you could back up a little bit and explain why a municipality needs a comprehensive plan and a land development code. Why can't they just operate under one document?
Well, they're two separate things. The land development code is laws. It's specifically what you can and cannot do. The comprehensive plan has some things like that, but it has much more. It has the vision of what the community wants to evolve into, what it wants to preserve, what it wants to change. It has a lot of specific policy ideas stated in general terms that will govern how the town government operates. And so the land development code needs to implement those. There are communities who adopt their comprehensive plan and never change their land development code, and the two are working at cross purposes, which makes no sense. So by state law, they have to be two separate documents, but it makes sense.
So is there any flexibility in the documents, and which one has more flexibility than the other?
The comprehensive plan is the governing, it's the higher up in the hierarchy. So the town government cannot approve any development that's not consistent with the comprehensive plan. I mean, that's state law. That's the way it is. So it's sort of in a superior position. The land development code, though, is more flexible and more detailed, a lot more detailed, but it allows changes, for instance, rezoning a property from one category to another or giving a variance. That's allowed in the land development code. It's not allowed in the comprehensive plan. So it enables it to be adjusted through time, fixed up, changed, thrown out, corrected.
So just for that example that you just said about rezoning, it's allowed in the land development code. It's not allowed in the comprehensive plan.
So the comprehensive plan has a future land use map, which is a little bit like a zoning map. To change that, the town council can do it, but they have to get state approval for it. So it's a big deal.
Okay,
It's
but
a much bigger deal.
just specifically on the zoning change that you mentioned, one says you can, one says you can't. How do you change the zone if one says you can and one says you can't?
Well, so for instance, in residential neighborhoods at Fort Myers Beach, the comprehensive plan calls those low density residential, but there's more than one kind of those are neighborhoods with detached homes. There's some that have larger lots and have sort of conventional suburban homes. And then there's the older neighborhoods where the lots are half the size. So there's two different zoning categories to implement that one future land use map category. And without that, there's no way to treat fairly both kinds of neighborhoods. If you were built before the current rules, then you're sort of illegal. You're
Non-conforming.
At best, you're non-conforming, but that's a real restrictive. You really don't want to be non-conforming. That says you can continue, but you can't rebuild. And right
And now
now,
what?
look
Yeah.
at the mess that would be. So by having the land development code with more details and no state control, it's just a local government decision,
Mhm.
as long as it stays consistent with the comprehensive plan.
So we hear a lot about height and the height of buildings and how high can they go. And now you just said, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm going to paraphrase, that the comprehensive plan is kind of the end all be all. That is the Bible. So what does the Bible say about, not the comprehensive plan say about height?
It says that most of the island is going to be limited to 2 stories above floodplain.
Okay.
We call that 3 stories in the land development code. But there will be some exceptions allowed through the land development code in the areas that are designated as redevelopment areas, which is the downtown area here, Crescent and Old San Carlos, and a little bit of Astoria Boulevard, and Santini Plaza and the Red Coconut. Those 3 are allowed to go more than 2 stories over flood. So the land development code is much more specific about what you can do and what you might be able to do if you rezone the property to that commercial plan development category, where it actually is a public hearing and the council has to make a decision. They have some latitude on height in those 3 areas I described. They really don't have any latitude outside that unless they go back and change the comprehensive plan to say something different.
And how much latitude is some latitude?
When the comprehensive plan was adopted in the end of 98, the
Mhm.
state was very involved in reviewing the comprehensive plan. They had to approve it, and they had a lot of problems with it. We didn't have enough regulations on bulk of buildings, and there was a lot of negotiations. They had a lot to say. Since then, the state oversight has gone down. It still exists, but it's way less than it was. So the local government now has more ability to change with less oversight. But the state oversight, a lot that remains, a lot has to do with barrier islands and danger and resiliency. So that is one of the areas that they still will pay attention to. And that's, of course, affects everything we do here.
So when you, yeah, go ahead.
I guess I'm trying to get at, is there a limit or is it limitless on height? With exceptions and in certain areas?
There's, in the exception areas, which is the downtown area here and Red Coconut and Villa Santini. And there's one other exception area, and that's if you have a property that's between 2 tall buildings and you have a short building, then maybe you can go as high as the people on each side of you. That's another, there's several exceptions like
Okay.
that. So in those cases, there's not a specific number that's the cap.
Okay.
So have you, I'm guessing you've been paying attention to what's going on down here with the,
I can't help it. I've spent a
Right,
lot of my
okay.
professional
Yeah,
life
yeah.
working down here and also involved in planning for Fort Myers Beach when I was a
Sure.
planner for Lee County. So yeah, I can't
and you
help
helped
but-
out with the TPI project when they were going through that. They hired you to help out with that.
about 5 years ago, yes.
When you see the proposal from Moss Marina, does that get approved?
It would require a change to the comprehensive plan, a change to the land development code, and
Okay, wait, you now.
3. It would require all 3. It would
So
require all 3.
they might go for zoning first because that might be the
They go for that last.
last.
Yes, because the comprehensive plan wouldn't allow their zoning change. The comprehensive plan would have to be changed to allow the zoning change. So that actually comes first.
Okay, so you're saying they have to change the comprehensive plan. Doesn't have to go to the state?
The state will review it and could object, or they might not be paying attention. Yes, it has to go to the state for their approval.
Okay, I don't think we've heard that explanation before, that the comprehensive plan has to be changed in order
First.
for Moss Marina to even be considered by the town council.
Well, the town council is the one who changes the comprehensive.
How long
plan.
is that? How long is that process to get the comprehensive plan changed by the state? Now, if they get the change, is that a precedent for all these other developments? They all then fit in?
Or is it just specific? Where we're like hammering you with questions.
That's
Is it
okay.
just
Come on, Bill.
specific for
That's
that area?
Come on, Bill.
That's okay.
For that, like,
Their proposal, as I understand, just looking at their website, was to add that property to this downtown area. So just change the boundary of this downtown area to include Moss Marine.
Which would be the zoning change.
Well, if that precedes the zoning change. Then the zoning change would be needed because they want to go taller,
Okay.
and also they want to do some other things that would require a
So
zoning
you're
change.
saying, no, it's not, it doesn't fit right now. There's no way that proposal fits right now.
Well, they know that, yes.
Okay. How does it fit? without having to change the comprehensive plan? What does it come down to?
They're in a category in the comprehensive plan called marina, for a marina. So that's really, they can do marinas and things like restaurants that are within a marina, and boat rentals and boat repair. But that's really what they're allowed to do today.
What about the pink shell proposal for, they have no density on that side of the road. They're proposing a 4-story parking garage and 4 stories of condos on top of that, 8 stories. Does that fit?
No, I mean, they transferred that density from that property across the street and got the taller building across the street. So in order now to create new density, they would have to change the comprehensive plan some way that would allow that. So,
Okay, so let's say Moss Marina goes through the process and gets the comprehensive plan changed. Does the pink shell have to go and get the comprehensive plan changed again? That the same process goes to the state?
yes,
So the town has to change the comprehensive plan for every project?
Well, they don't have to.
they don't have to, they can turn both of them down.
Okay,
They're
I
under no
gotcha.
obligation to change either one.
I see. So, how does that fit? How do you see that anything fitting on that side of the road over there by the pink shell? They have 0 density. What fits?
I asked myself that question when I
Saw
read
that.
about that proposal.
What about Beach Baptist, 8 stories over there? How does that fit?
It's the same situation. They're allowed 2 stories over parking. And if they want anything more than that, they would have to change both the comprehensive plan and the zoning.
Okay. That is
So-
a totally clear explanation.
And I just want to make sure I get this right. So you're saying that the order in which things happen is the comprehensive plan gets changed first and then the zoning.
They're allowed to do both simultaneously.
Okay.
And so at the final hearing, comprehensive plan has to be approved first, but it could be 10 minutes later that the zoning's approved. So they're allowed to move.
Pretty
Together.
quickly through
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So,
And that for each situation, it's got to be, the comprehensive plan would have to be reviewed or changed. It's not like if there's a change for one, then everybody else can fall under that rule. It's
Well, I mean, if the town changed the comprehensive plan to say that 6 or 8 stories are okay everywhere on the island, then that would just have to be done once.
okay.
okay. So the next question I had for you was, I lost my train of thought because
What's
you
your
cut
most
me off.
embarrassing moment?
No.
I just want to ask, just
all right,
while you
good,
give
'cause
you a
maybe
minute
I'll
to think,
remember.
because this isn't a hard question.
Oh, I got it.
What
I'll
training,
write it down.
like to be a planner? So that's your title. You're
Yes. I'm an unusual planner. I actually.
Oh, there
had
we
a-
go.
had
Here
a
we
re-
go.
I was a small remodeling contractor,
Huh.
and I served as a volunteer on the Lee County Zoning Board for years. And I went before the commission asking for variances for some of my building clients. And I actually got hired as a junior planner because I knew about construction, engineering, and architecture. Very unusual way to get into planning.
Huh.
So both the town council and the LPA have kind of reiterated that the comprehensive plan, the way it is what they want to kind of follow, which means that,
I don't know one way or the other.
no, I'm
You're very
I
you're
watched the
very good
meetings.
at this.
Sorry,
You're very good at this.
that's the view I got from watching the meetings, that they want to, that what's in place is what they should follow. So in your opinion, how high do the buildings go? They can only go what the comprehensive plan says, right? Unless you change it, which they said they don't want to.
But they might, when looking at a specific
Okay.
proposal, it could
Might change their
It
mind.
could be very attractive. For instance, with Times Square in shambles.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole idea of extending this pedestrian commercial zone down Old San Carlos was always because it seemed that at some point Times Square might not survive. It might get knocked down by a hurricane. The buildings might become no longer viable to keep fixing up. So the idea was to extend that pedestrian zone here all the way to the water.
Mhm.
The Moss Marine people are saying, we'll extend it further down on our property. Well, that's,
It did seem like Moss Marina's project had the best chance of passing when these other 2 monsters came up, and then they've just kind of gone silent. I don't know if that means anything or not, but it does also sound from the way you explain it that there really needs to be a rejigger of the whole thing if it's going to
well,
fit.
they would, when we did the comprehensive plan originally, it was a marina and they had no interest in
Yeah.
changing anything. And we talked to them, that was what they wanted. So we never considered, could this pedestrian zone be bigger? So now that's what they're putting on the table. And that's an offer that the council could find very attractive.
Right.
How
So
many so I mean, I don't know how much experience you have in other places, but how many times do municipalities or communities change their comprehensive plan?
Fort Myers Beach changes it very rarely
Okay.
compared to most places.
Okay.
Some places change parts of their plans several times per year, which basically means the plan doesn't fit their community very well if it constantly has to change.
Right.
And the only reason that there's talk now of several changes is because of Hurricane Ian and the problems related to that.
What time is it in France?
I don't know.
You know, Anita's watching. She says hello to you
She
from
is
France.
in
But she's in
Spain.
Barcelona.
Oh, sorry. I thought it was
I don't
France.
know what it is with you and
I
France.
know she's probably
in
going to yell next
España.
time. I told you I wasn't going to Paris. So when you explain the comprehensive plan and the land development code the way you do, and people that are trying to rebuild hear you say that, they're going to be like, ugh, this is going to take forever for us to get anything built.
Well, most people won't need to do that. I mean, that was the point of the comprehensive plan, was to say that when a disaster comes, when the next one comes, even if your property is developed more than would be allowed today and more than your neighbors, still, if it's knocked down, you can rebuild that same amount. That was in it. So you didn't have to rezone. You didn't have to change. You could just rebuild. And that is the rule. I mean, that's the rule today. But if people want to rebuild more because they think they need to or they want to, then they might get forced into some of these processes to get a hearing on it. But if they rebuild to the same square footage, and if they elevate the building to meet all the new rules, they can do that.
But their argument is the price of construction, the parking regulations that they now have to follow, they can't do it. Do you buy that?
I don't doubt that in some cases that's true. I mean, the cost of construction, especially elevated construction to the new flood standards, it's high. And basically the law's not stopping them, but that doesn't mean that people are going to be able to do it or want to do it or want to take the risk to borrow the money to do it.
When the comprehensive, and we've talked about this a little bit, but I just want to put a fine point on it. When the comprehensive plan was developed, it was developed with foresight, looking to the future for a disaster. Did it, in your mind, envision this level?
Did it do a good enough job?
Well,
on this subject, I would say no.
When you were sitting there, would you have thought something this devastating or no? And no judgment either way. I'm just wondering. Yeah.
I know it's happened other places and it could happen here, but we had been in this, many, many decades of it not happening here. We were all feeling pretty safe. And I will have to say that since that was done, we've had Hurricane Charlie, pretty bad here. Worse other places, pretty bad here. And Hurricane Ian, really terrible here in 18 years. So now, I mean, I look back and say, were we blind to this kind of devastation being not just possible, but happening twice? And if everything we understand about the way the climate is changing, it's going to be happening again and again, and maybe worse. Suddenly, it doesn't make sense to always let everybody rebuild everything they had, even though it's more than the rules allow. I mean, I advocated for that. I thought that was fair. It's property rights. It would keep things simple. But
you did say before that you don't think that it holds up.
Well, my question is, were we absolutely right to say everybody can rebuild everything they had? Other people say we need to build a lot more, and I go, we do.
Right.
Yeah, we do. And I'm thinking, were we too generous already saying people who are over density could rebuild to over density? I advocated for that. I thought it was the right thing to do, but I'm less certain now than I was then.
Okay, you lost me a little bit. Do you think people should be able to build back to what they had, or do you think they should be able to build back higher?
So it's a little bit complicated. If you have
well, dumb it down as best you can for him.
I'm not good at that. I'm not good at simplifying it because it's complicated. It really is. If you have a hotel, let's say, and you have 50 rooms, somebody else building a hotel today could only build 20 rooms, and you have 50. You get destroyed. We said you can build back all 50, even though your neighbor can only build 20. That recognizes property rights nicely, but it's not exactly fair to everybody else.
What is fair right now?
In the current state, it's hard to know. In the current state where everybody needs to be incredibly strong and as patient as we possibly can be, it's really hard to talk about the bigger picture. It's almost impossible to talk about this bigger picture. Yet how do we avoid that? You know, how do we avoid that if everybody says I need more height and density, and we say we feel bad because you got destroyed, and so you can have more height and density.
Got to do it for everybody.
In 5 years, what do you look back at and say, what were we thinking? So
Did we give away too much? You know, the other side
I
of
don't
it
have
is
the answer to that. I'm just saying that's what's when you
Yeah.
ask me what's on my
Those
mind.
are
That's
questions,
what's
yeah.
on my mind.
Is
when
that
you-
what keeps you up at night?
It does absolutely.
when you walk from Bowditch to Times Square, other than the pink shell, there's only one condo open. Some of them haven't been touched.
It's unbelievable. I mean, it's just breathtaking.
So what is your advice to the people that are trying to put their businesses back together? Build what you can. Well, I didn't mean to put words in your mouth.
You know, you've got the town's rules, and then you've got the FEMA rules, and then you've got your insurance company, and you've got your bankers, and you've got a shortage of construction labor and a shortage of design people, and still lingering supply chain problems from COVID. How did anybody think this was going to be anything other than a miserable slog? And it is for everybody. And I'm amazed how many people have made a lot of progress, because I just know how slow everything is in the construction and design and permitting business.
Do you think it's moving too slow on the beach?
Well, it's certainly too slow, but I also think it's about the way I would have expected it to go.
Okay.
I don't think it's slower than I would have expected it to go.
What advice do you have for the town council and the LPA?
Well, just to try and, when they're making decisions, to try and think of what I said. When you look back 5 years from now and you do what I'm doing and saying, did we do the right thing? Try and think about that a little bit, because it's really hard to do that in today. We're just trying to get everybody back on their feet. But when there is a chance maybe to have rebuilt a little bit differently, that's sort of a rare opportunity. And I hate to see it squandered, although I understand that everybody's just trying to get on their feet, and that opportunity may not be taken.
From your experience with seeing things like this, do you think the beach is going to be replaced by only people that have big money?
Well, it's already been going that way. I mean, already before Ian, unless you bought a home here some years back,
You'll never get one now.
we've already passed that threshold, and I think it's only going to get worse after Ian. I mean, the cost of building buildings that can survive that kind of storm is very high, more expensive. That leaves a lot of people out.
One of the things that I hadn't heard until all of this whole process started was there are some municipalities that don't even listen to variances. You think that what you got on paper is what you got. You can't ask for a variance. What is your opinion on that?
Well, most communities will consider variances, and most communities will have something like the commercial plan development, the CPD process. Most communities have that, because so work on land development codes a lot all over the place. And, you know, we really, really, really try and think of everything, and we never do. And other people come in with the property with something really creative that we hadn't thought of, and the rules don't allow it. And, you know, I would never be one to say, if the planners who wrote that code didn't think of it, it should never happen. And so there needs to be some way to consider an idea that hadn't come up before. And
So the CPD, you brought it up.
Yep.
Anita explained it great the other night when she was on. Does that get a Moss Marine out of having to change the land development code?
No, because they would have to change the comprehensive plan to get their land into this pedestrian commercial area. They would have to change the zoning map also. So it would be a land development code change, or possibly just a CPD. I don't know. There's
Okay, so
a lot
that
of nuances there that,
yeah.
that I'm sure their people are.
If you say
working
you
on.
don't know, can you imagine all the rest of us?
Well, they have
Bill?
a whole crack team of people who
Sure.
study this.
Yeah.
I'm talking from memory quite a few years ago. So, and also the town council has changed some of the rules.
Okay.
I want to go back to that father of land development code. Yes, I was hired to run that process, but it's not like I went back to my office and said, this is what you need for Myers Beach, and came and delivered to them. That's absolutely not how it works, especially in this community. The actual process involved a couple of years of couple of month meetings, primarily with the local planning agency, and also with the council, where I would bring them 2 or 3 things at a meeting and say, here's 2 or 3 big problems, and here are a couple ways you might go about addressing each of those, and what do you think? And we would discuss it at that general stage before I'd ever actually start writing code words.
Mhm.
So when the code is done and it goes to the public hearing process, yeah, people can stand up and say, I like it, or I don't like it, or change this one thing. But basically, it's mostly gone through 2 years of public scrutiny. So I don't know how that describes my role. I was the quarterback maybe, but
Yeah.
it really
Yeah.
was, it really
It was
was
a
the
group
plan,
effort.
really the plan and the code for the beach with very active and superior quality local planning agency and council members. Just astounding. I work a lot of other places, and I often think back to this experience as being gratifying because of that level of involvement.
How many years of college do you need to go to be as smart as you are?
You can probably do it with 4 years, although honestly, there are a lot of smart people without any years of college. So even that's a
Wow.
bit arbitrary.
There's a difference though between being smart and having wisdom, and that's the wisdom you just can't get
Yeah.
at a
Can
school.
you, because you were involved in that project too, Margaritaville takes a lot of criticism because of the size of the project, but it does fit into the land development code, does it not? Can you explain to people that say it's too big or why did they get away with it? They fit into the land development code.
Okay, mostly yes. Okay, they did not have to change the comprehensive plan. They did have to rezone to commercial plan development. And the reason they had to do that was because they wanted more hotel rooms than they were allowed to build. I mean, like 3 times as many. And so the comprehensive plan says, we'll consider that in the downtown area only.
Okay.
If you rezone and if you show that you meet all the policies in the plan and sort of unstated is, this is a little bit of a negotiation. So it went through all that process, and it was a close call. It was a judgment call of the council, and my advice to them was that they had the authority to say yes or no. They could be right and say yes or no. And I laid out, like I did with the land development code, all the good things that would say you ought to do it, and all the things that say maybe you shouldn't do it, maybe it's too big, and that, especially facing Crescent Street, it's really big and really long. And they talked about it for several meetings and ultimately decided after a little more negotiation to approve it.
And when you say negotiation, you're talking about the public benefit. So how big a role does that play in all these projects?
Well, it can play a big role in something that's a close call.
Okay.
In most CPD rezonings, it's not even a factor, but something that large and asking for that many more hotel rooms really would change the face of the beach. And the town council wanted some public benefits for it, and they were offered quite substantial ones, and that made a difference.
Do you think it was the right call for them to approve it?
Every time I come down here and I look at it, I think that's pretty big, but that's not bad. So I still am on the fence on it.
You are. Okay. Great. Any other questions, Chair? Did we miss anything?
No.
Bill, do you think
Is there anything else you want to get out there?
Just what I said earlier, that it's so hard in the midst of putting yourself back together to think about long-term stuff. But on the other hand, this is a unique opportunity to think about long-term stuff. And I would urge them to do so to the best that they can while their lives are chaos.
Thank you so much for coming on,
Thank
Bill.
you.
Bill's